Binging on movies with Rebecca and Jason.
Are you gonna love them or hate them? Here comes the binge.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Binge movie podcast, in which a couple of homos review the latest movie theater releases from our own queer-ass perspectives. I am Jason Leroy.
And I'm Rebecca Olarte, and today we have a very special interview that Jason did with the director of Moonlight, Barry Jenkins.
Yes. So Moonlight is one of the year's best movies.
That's what I've heard.
It's been hotly tipped since it first started to be screened for people, and I saw it at Toronto. Ding! Second time I've said that in the new calendar year.
I feel like this also came up at the same time that Birth of a Nation was getting bad press, so it was like, oh, maybe there's another option.
Right, which is, of course, a very reductive way of looking at it.
I'm talking about the media. So.
Yes, I know. No, I mean, like, and that was something that I had on my list of things to maybe talk to him about, but ultimately I decided not to, just because I knew already, that he was going to be like, dude, come on.
I mean, like, some chump at Vulture already
it's
did
a
that. Conversation
that he, that he's aware of and that he doesn't want to have to keep having,
Nobody
I'm
needs
sure.
to have that discussion.
Because it's a deeply cynical conversation that there can only be this one
Absolutely.
black movie that becomes an awards frontrunner. With that said, that is a real thing. Whether or not it should be, it is a real thing.
Right.
And Moonlight is certainly in that conversation. And I will say, strictly in terms of comparing the two of them, that Moonlight is leagues and bounds better than The Birth of a Nation.
Let me cut in to do a little intro of the movie, and then we'll play the trailer, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about your thoughts on the movie.
Let's do it. Let's hear a clip.
So the movie is a timeless story of human connection and self-discovery. It chronicles the life of a young black man from childhood to adulthood as he struggles to find his place in the world while growing up in a rough neighborhood of Miami.
At some point, you gotta decide for yourself who you're gonna be. Can't let nobody make that decision for you.
You gonna tell him why the other boys kick his ass all the time? What's wrong?
I'm good.
No, I done seen good, and you ain't it.
So thanks for letting us play that.
You got irregular Frankie Knuckles over there with your clips.
You know me. Trying to keep an order.
I know, I got you. So Moonlight, it started off as... Barry Jenkins, our interview subject today, is a director and writer. This is his second feature as a director. His first was Medicine for Melancholy, which came out in 2008. And it was in San Francisco, a huge topic of conversation because it was set here, and it's actually a very ahead of its time story. It's almost sort of like a Black Before Sunrise. It stars Wyatt Cenac, who went on to be on The Daily Show, and it's about this would-be one-night stand between a black man and a black woman that turns into like a day spent walking around San Francisco together and sort of talking about what it's like to be young and black in the city. And so things that have gone on to become much bigger issues in terms of like the dwindling black population of the city, in terms of police harassment of black people in San Francisco, in terms of gentrification and taking over of historic neighborhoods. Like, this is just a check-in in 2008
Wow.
for what was going on at that point. And it was definitely a movie that had a lot of conversation going around in San Francisco at the time. Outside of San Francisco, it was maybe a little bit less talked about, but A.O. Scott did put it on his 10 best films of the year list in the New York Times. But then Barry Jenkins kind of went away for a while, and then he gradually came to find this project. So Moonlight, it's based on an unpublished play by a MacArthur Genius Grant recipient named Terrell McCraney. And it turned out that both Terrell and Barry grew up in the exact same part of Miami that it takes place in.
Oh, interesting.
And which is called Liberty City, and it's a very, very rough area. And then not only did they grow up there around the same time, but they both had mothers who were crackheads.
Oh.
And so they had all these points of connection in their lives. And so even though Terrell was writing from a queer perspective and Barry is not queer, when he read this text, he was blown away, and so he set off adapting it and turning it into this amazing movie. So as you described in your summary of it, it's a story in 3 acts. So we check in with this boy when he's very young, and the chapter is just called Little. because that was what everyone called him. The middle is when he is kind of later in senior high, and it's called Chiron, which is his actual name. And then the third chapter is him as an adult man, and it's called Black, which was a nickname that he had when he was a teenager. And it's really about it's the intersection. The word intersection gets used a lot around this movie, and this is a great movie to talk about in terms of intersectionality, because it's an intersection of race, it's an intersection of class, it's an intersection of sexuality, because it is a queer story, and Chiron is a gay character, and so we see so it's about the construction of masculinity, black masculinity in particular, within this kind of impoverished setting. And this little boy who's realizing that he's different and trying to find out what that means in this world and what that world outside of himself thinks of him, and trying to navigate it as safely as possible with different kind of parental figures. So Naomi Harris plays his mother in a very, very raw, affecting performance that's been getting a lot of supporting actress buzz. And then in a really mind-blowingly beautiful performance, Mahershala Ali from House of Cards and from Kicks.
He was just in Kicks, yeah.
Yes. Plays...
and Luke Cage.
And Luke Cage, yes.
Big year.
Big year for him. And he plays... And he's also getting a lot of awards buzz for this performance. He plays a crack dealer who becomes sort of a de facto father figure to young Chiron when he's little. His wife is played by Janelle Monáe.
Oh, interesting.
So she's in it as well, and then so we kind of see, this is what he had as a child to help build him, but then things don't necessarily go well. This is one of the most heartbreaking movies I have ever seen.
Wow.
It just is pummeling, but it earns it. It earns every bit of pummel that it gives you. And there are moments in this movie that I feel like the emotional experience of watching will be like imprinted on me forever.
That's amazing.
It's really remarkable. These three actors who've been cast to play Chiron at 3 different ages are not known actors. I think that the little boy had never acted before, and yet they each of them is so brilliant and plays the role so perfectly. We also have a character that is named Kevin, who is Chiron's friend, who in all 3 chapters is there, and is somebody who he kind of has this crush on. So we get to see this evolution of this relationship between Chiron and his friend, Kevin, who he has this crush on. But to call it a crush almost kind of sounds like it undermines or suggests that it's not a movie of extreme gravity in its depiction of the things that end up happening. So it's really just a knockout. The musical cues are all superb. This is a movie that it's also A24 is, this is their movie.
A24 every time.
And it's the first movie that they produced and financed and not just distributed.
Really?
So this is
good things to come.
Yes. So it's very exciting. It speaks very well of things to come from A24, who continues to be killing it in the game. So I was very honored to get to sit down and talk with Barry about all of this, and also talk about his time living in San Francisco. He actually worked at Banana Republic when he was here. We talk about that a bit. Myself also having been an alumni of Gap Inc. And he even has a story about how one of the best song cues in the movie comes from going to Soul Night at the Makeout Room.
Oh, nice! Great.
Let's
listen to the interview.
All right. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it. Pleasure. I was reading the Fader profile of you this morning, and in it you talked about just the anxiety of having the Telluride premiere and getting it out there for the public. We're 6 or 7 weeks later now, so I was wondering how you're feeling at this point.
No, I mean, it's gone extremely well. I feel like a very privileged person at this point. I have friends who've made films that are really, really awesome. That for whatever reason don't do this or do that, and so it's been really nice. The biggest thing is, the places we've been aren't places like the location the movie is set. They're not inner city Miami, and the audiences don't feature characters like our characters, and yet people are identifying with the film in a very passionate, intimate way. There's something really wonderful about that. I mean, as any kind of artist, it's sort of like the thing you hope for.
Is there anything that's been especially surprising about the reactions you've been getting so far?
Not surprising. I think, just me as an artist, I never think anybody's going to vibe with what I make. So, but that's sort of this thing of self-deprecation and whatnot. But no, again, it's just been the fact that, I've had people from completely different socioeconomic backgrounds than the characters in this film have just like a deep reaction to the movie, these deep levels of empathy. And it's not that it's surprising, but it's just like, it's unexpected, I think, again, any artist, you never expect someone to see that much of what you see in your own work. But the biggest thing is I think people are seeing themselves in the film, despite, not having anything directly in relation to the characters or the story.
Yeah, it's, there's always that universality and specificity, and you have your own references you bring to the table when you watch it. I for one, was thinking a lot about Heath Ledger and Brokeback Mountain during the third chapter especially. There just felt like a really deep soul connection between those two. And for Miami, my main reference had always just been the Golden Girls, so now, yeah.
We actually scouted the neighborhood where the Golden Girls house
No.
Was. And I think I got on Twitter and I pitched like a remake of Golden Girls that featured like, it was like Oprah and Michelle Williams or something. But yeah, it's funny that there have been certain depictions of Miami in television and cinema. None of them have come even close, I feel like, to the neighborhood, and the characters in this film. And I don't know why that is, just like, people are talking about Moonlight as it relates to the Black experience. The Black experience is this very wide, sort of sweeping thing. I think Miami, in the same way, is this sort of wide, sweeping, very diverse place. And many slivers of the city have been touched on, but for whatever reason, this one had not been. And it took someone like Terrell, who's just so of Miami, to kickstart the process of that happening.
Yeah. Almost every profile of you I've read has something in it about. He's described as very private and very guarded, and yet in those same profiles, with this movie, you're being very honest and frank about your childhood and your connections to the story. How has that been for you to kind of be out in public in the press talking about that stuff?
It's interesting, and as I said in the Fader profile, it kind of snuck up on me. In my mind, I was hiding behind Terrell. It's not about me; it's about this dude.
Yeah.
But I think, just the way I go about making movies or making anything, I can't not put my full self into it. And so what ended up happening was, in having the comfort of the movie, the story originating with Terrell, and being, I would say, more biographical to him than it is to me, it allowed me the space, to really sort of, like, as you say, come out from behind closed doors and actually deal with the mess of my childhood and my relationship to my mom in a really visceral way. The whole process of making this film has been incredibly therapeutic, because as a filmmaker, I didn't get into this until I'd left Miami. I went off to college in Tallahassee, and then I just kept moving westward.
Right.
And so this movie sort of snapped me back to Miami in a way that I definitely was not capable of, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. That I just emotionally wasn't ready for.
Yeah. Do you think the extent to which, working at Telluride as the programmer and doing these Q&As, facilitating these things, that they've, thoroughly kind of prepared you for being on the other side in this very kind of extensive press tour you're going to be doing?
Yeah, in a certain way. I've done a lot of things at Telluride. I think my filmmaking voice kind of was developed there. The first time I went there was as a part of this program called the Student Symposium, where you see a film and you go back to a classroom, the filmmaker walks in, and for an hour they just talk about their process. It's a very, very humanizing, I guess is the way, but it made filmmaking seem attainable. Here are these titans of world cinema, and they're talking about, basically they have the same problems I have in my student films. And so over the course of the last 14 years, I guess I've been at the festival, I've seen a lot of this stuff. And I've also been on the other side. I've been the person holding the recorder, asking these questions.
Yeah.
And so, I guess it kind of has been a boot camp for this moment I find myself in now. But I also realize how much of a privilege it is, too.
Is there a chapter of the movie that you feel the strongest personal connection to?
I mean, everything with Naomi Harris's character Paula, I feel like is very, very. It's shared between myself and Terrell, but that's the place where I see myself the most, like in this character, the way he relates to his mother. And so I'd say that scene in the third story where Black visits Paula, I think that's where I kind of like see the most. But then on the other side too, you know, as people say in these interviews, I'm a very guarded, private kind of person. And I think because of my relationship with my mom, and just the way I grew up, I do have a hard time sort of like opening up, you know, in interpersonal relationships sometimes. And so I think the way Trevante and Andre have this sort of tete-a-tete in that diner, it was a very visceral experience for me because I could see in both those men, you know, myself and so many of my past relationships and trying to allow myself to be fully present, you know, in those relationships, but never having 20 minutes of a film, you know, to actually like study it and study myself.
Yeah. The use of Barbara Lewis' Hello Stranger in that scene knocked me on my ass.
You know, do you live here?
I do, yeah.
So that's a very San Francisco moment. So I used to go to the soul night at the Makeout Room.
Oh, yeah.
And the Tuesday soul night, not the Saturday soul night. And they play it's like slow, chill soul. And they only play 45s. And that was the first time I heard that Barbara Lewis. And I just remember the first time, who was the DJ? I think it was Primo. First time Primo dropped the needle on that Barbara Lewis, I was like, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And I did something you're not supposed to do, because I went to film school. I know you're not supposed to do this, but when we shot that scene, we played that song in the diner out loud every time, because I was like, I am planting a flag, and this song is in the film. And you know, and it's filmmakers or student filmmakers don't ever do that. But yeah, it was one of those things where I just knew the emotion of that song, because I knew what it had done to me, and it just had to be there.
How long did you live in the Bay Area?
8 years, 6 in San Francisco, 9 years, 7 in San Francisco, 2 in Oakland.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you worked at a Banana Republic at one point?
I did. So the still photographer on this film worked with me at Banana Republic. This guy, David Bornfriend. Best job I've ever had in my life. I worked I was on the shipping crew, and so I get there at 5:30 in the morning. The truck would show up. We'd unload the boxes, but the beauty of it was we would just stand around these massive tables like this, and we would, you know, unbox things and fold them. And it's like me and 2 dudes from the hood who actually put in Medicine for Melancholy. And then there'd be like a deaf woman who only spoke sign language. There'd be a Chinese immigrant, one who spoke English, one who didn't, and the nephew would like translate the aunt's jokes at the table. And then there'd be like these white girls who are going like the Fashion Institute, and we're all just around this table for like 7 hours just talking about our day, you know, 5:30, 6:30, 7:30 in the morning. And then I'd get off at 2 and I'd go to the cafe and write. So it was like the best job ever.
I think it's a more enriching Gap Inc. experience than most have. I also was in the Gap Inc. family for 5 years, so...
See, I never worked the floor, and I heard working the floor was horrible.
Yeah, you weren't folding sweaters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I feel like the concept of toxic masculinity is becoming a major buzzword, perhaps because of one of our presidential candidates. But I feel like no movie has ever illustrated the construction of masculinity like Moonlight has. I was wondering if you know, what connection, if any, you feel to those conversations around like toxic masculinity.
No, big time. I think we couldn't have cast Trevante Rhodes, who plays Black in the third story, and not been leaning into the idea of that conversation and just sort of you know, from a psychotherapy standpoint, you know, the ways in which society can sometimes dictate, you know, not only masculinity but so many different aspects of our personalities, you know. And I think that the movie, you know, we cast these 3 different actors to play the same character, and all this time passes between the chapters. And the idea is, in that time that's passing, when you see this new person, it's because now we're showing you how the world has shaped them. You know, this is what happens, you know. And I think when we get to the third story, and, you know, we see this guy with all these muscles and these fronts, you know, to me it's an idea of this notion of toxic masculinity run amok, you know, to the point where, you know, this guy is not allowed the outside world, but is sort of almost thrown in the towel. And now he's like, this is what I'll do to the outside world can't get in. To me, and I think it's something we don't talk about often because it's so prevalent. It's almost like I want to say it's systemic in a certain way. There are ways of being a man that are acceptable, and there are ways of being a man that are unacceptable. And usually, the ways that are acceptable are designed to completely subdue the ways that aren't or that are deemed unacceptable. And I think the journey of this character is about charting, how, I think in a very subtle way, the dynamics of that can bear out how you can see those if you watch a person evolve over time.
Yeah, it's brilliantly done.
Thank you, man.
You brought Madison for Melancholy, which now feels almost ahead of its time.
It feels old.
Almost quaint. Like, oh, it's like things seem more hopeful. What kind of conversations do you think they'd be having if that film took place today? How their conversations have changed?
Oh my! I mean, could we find that? You know what? I'm not. It's funny. I was talking to Pam Grady, and we almost got into this topic, and I was just like, you know what? I made a movie about Miami. I'm going to talk about Miami on this press tour. I am not going to talk about the only two black people in San Francisco. I am just not going to do it. No. The city has changed. So when I made that film, I got in here for the first time in like 02 or 03. And then, I think I started writing that film around 06 or 07. And now to think, if I was like pissed or feeling sort of like off kilter about the city then, can you imagine? I mean, it is insane. It is insane. And I think the thing I think of is, I made this film called Remigration in 2011. That was sort of a more, I think, mature extrapolation of some of the themes that the characters are talking about in medicine. And really what it was about was this notion of the working class and this sort of like passive or this microaggression towards the working class, in a city where, the standard of living or the cost of living is so ridiculously high. Yeah. And so I don't know that the themes in medicine would be at the core of the piece. If I made it today, there probably might be some other deeper, darker shit at play, because I do think the situation in the city has gotten more dire. I don't live here anymore, so I can't really speak to it, but
sure.
I mean, just being around, it seems like you live here, right? What's going on with your city, girl?
Technically, I'm in Daly City.
See? Mm-hmm.
So, not really San Francisco.
That's right.
No, but it's, at the end of the day, it's a beautiful city, and it always will be. And people will always want to live here. It's just a shame that, for certain very particular reasons, a lot of people just literally cannot.
Yeah, no, I've been here since 2005.
You got rent control?
I do.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, you sit on that, bro.
Golden handcuffs, they call it.
Nice.
You can't ever leave it.
Mm-hmm. And don't let them buy you out either, because that shit,
no,
not worth it.
No, I agree.
But let's talk about the movie, bro. I can't, because I know it's going to always happen. I'm going to get drawn into San Francisco housing and politics. I know.
And you made a movie that just resonated with all of us so deeply. It's just going to keep coming up. I remember it was the talk of Dolores Park the year it came out.
Well, and I heard they were playing Solange in Dolores Park last weekend. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm kind of proud of that a little bit.
I know. I was going to ask about the Solange album. I saw you tweet about it.
I love it. I love it so much. I mean, if that had come out, I mean, it's too contemporary to have been in the movie, but I feel like this movie is made on this, just not influence, but I definitely feel inspired by all these black artists that have been working in the last 5 to 8 years, contributing to this, whatever this thing is that I'm glad to be a part of again. And I think records like Frank's last 2 records, Solange's, I kind of feel like I'm like surfing this wave, and the water is composed of all this other just great art that everybody's making right now.
What a delightful interview, and even a little bit of rental advice.
Yes. It's wise words. So it was really a treat, and here at the Binge, we can't wait to see what Barry does next, and we can't wait to see what happens when you all get to see Moonlight, and then, God willing, once award season dips into it good and well.
This is definitely getting a binge it from you.
All the way, it's going to be in the best of the year list for sure.
And then can you just run over the release dates real quick?
So Moonlight is going to be opening in New York and LA on the 21st of October, and then the following week, the 28th, it will be opening in San Francisco. And then check your local listings if you're outside those cities to see when it comes your way.
Awesome. And it's rated R for some sexuality, drug use, brief violence, and language throughout. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed that interview. I sure did. And be sure to find Jason on Twitter at
Excess Baggage.
I refuse to say it. I don't know if you've picked
I
up on
picked
that.
up on that, yes.
And I am at Fight Balance.
Well, I won't say that either because I'm not a fighter. So there.
And you have terrible balance. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Binging on movies with Rebecca and Jason.
You made it to the end, that's amazing. There goes the binge.